What's going on? We're back, and it's time to better know a commander. We got 4 really different decks for you this week. It's a really solid take on Jund with Kresh the Bloodbraided. How about some Abzan Enchantments? Onyxia's getting the job done there. When it's time to party, we party hard with Xenagos, God of Revels. And of course, frickin' birds, baby. We've got Falco Spara up 4th. Make sure you like and follow, share this video, and let me know which commanders you'd like to see next. Let's get into it. Is there anyone else out there that just wants to take their love of Jund and play it in Commander? Well, now you can. Well, you always could, but this is the guy to do it, I think. We've got Kresh the Bloodbraided. Whenever another creature is put into a graveyard from play, you can put X +1/+1 counters on Kresh, where X is the power of that creature. So Jund classically in 1v1 formats is trading resources 1 for 1, 1 for 1, 1 for 1, until it's you and your top deck versus your opponent and their top deck. Then, because your creatures are genuinely bigger, think Tarmogoyf, or your cards trade 2 for 1 for some reason, like Bloodbraid Elf, you're able to close out the game. Nothing's really been banned out of Jund except for Bloodbraid Elf, which is not banned anymore in Modern, because none of the cards by themselves do anything particularly amazing, but they definitely tax the resources of your opponents. This is tough to do in Commander, because you have to go after the resources of not just one opponent, but 3 opponents. So let's see how we can do that. We got to play a lot of creatures that give us tons of other tokens and things like that. So the new Gruff Triplets is a definite include in this deck. Same with Mosswood Dread Knight. Because you can cast them from your graveyard, you get to use them over and over again. We want to murk all of our opponent's creatures all at once. So we're playing Fleshbag Marauder, we're playing Plague Crafter, we're playing Merciless Executioner, and we're playing Mandate of Abaddon. All of these creatures dying are going to put so many counters onto Kresh the Bloodbraided, to the point where he's going to be so much bigger than everything else on the board, and you're going to be able to swing in and take out creatures your opponents control. I think there's also room for a Ravenous Chupacabra in this build, and it's really nice if we have a sack outlet to use all that power, and Greater Good's a great way to do that. Another thing that we can do is reanimate Yargle and Multani, and then kill it. Let's get 18 counters onto Kresh the Bloodbraided. Why not? Another creature that you get to play in this deck is Brawn. As long as you control a forest, and this is in your graveyard, all your creatures have trample. We get to play Braid's Arisen Nightmare. I get to keep recommending this card for black decks. Lots of sacrifice going on here. It gets real annoying for your opponents, especially when you're trying to starve their resources to begin with. We get to use Rite of Consumption to take out one of our creatures and drain out one of our opponents. Since our creatures are going away, we want our old creatures to come back, and Riveteer's Ascendancy helps with that. I think this might even be a deck where you can tuck in a Mask of Gristlebrand. Why not give Kresh Flying and Lifelink? That seems really good. And of course, we're playing Dictate of Erebos, because when our creatures die, we want our opponent's creatures to die, and this just helps. As a bonus, you might want to play Shieldred, the Whispering One. Your opponents sacrifice creatures and you get to reanimate creatures. That seems good. So there you go. We've got Kresh the Bloodbraided, the epitome of Jund decks. Now go forth and Jund them out. Hope this helps. Have you ever wanted to win with an Enchantress deck? I'm going to show you. Come along with me as we build a very frustrating deck for our opponents. We're talking Onyxia, Hand of Erebos. If you want to get off on the right foot, I would say go find the precon. It's a little more expensive because the Commander Masters precons just were, but this deck has lots of cool cards right out of the box. We're just going to upgrade it and go from there. So you might be thinking right away, Enchantress deck, that's a Sithis Harvest Hands deck. And you're right, the green-white Enchantress deck is awesome. Those of you that love it should continue to play it and frustrate your opponents. I want to get a little bit more out of my deck, and adding black and using the graveyard is the kind of thing I love to do. So we're going with Onyxia. But Sithis is a part of the deck, we're putting it in there. We're also adding O'Hare Talk, Deepest Foundation. We're tripling the 3/3s that are coming out of our graveyard. So enchantments that have strong ETBs are things that we're going to look for and prioritize. This is also your excuse to treat yourself and get a Serra Sanctum. We love the Urza Saga's legendary lands. And by no means is this priced reasonably, but compared to Gaia's Cradle and Tolarian Academy, or what Tolarian Academy would cost if it was legal, this is peanuts, kinda. If you don't want to get a Serra Sanctum, you definitely need a Sanctum Weaver. It does the same thing, but you get to choose the color, so maybe that's upside. We're also going to play our Abzan Enchantress. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. This thing needs to get reprinted some kind of bad. You can play Enchantress's Presence, which is the same thing on an enchantment, but doesn't have Shroud. We're also going to play Ephemerif Enchantress. We have a graveyard sub-theme, so getting enchantments into our graveyard is a good thing. We want to do that. And of course, we're going to play Mesa Enchantress as well. What you really want is turns that take 4 and 5 and 6 minutes at a time, because you cast a spell, you draw 6 cards, you gain 6 life, and you have to refresh the entire table on what they can and can't do. You get to play the only land that's also an enchantment, Urza's Saga. This is going to search up your Jeweled Lotus for when you need to recast a Nixthia. It gets your Soul Ring. It gets a Pithing Needle. Whatever utility artifact you have in your deck. You're not going to have a ton, but this will get it. We don't want our stuff countered, so we're playing Destiny Spinner. Keeps your creatures and enchantments from being countered. I'm not sure that you're going to use the other ability, but it's there for you if you like it. We're getting this cool drain effect by playing Grim Guardian. We're going to play Gloom Shrieker. It's going to be better for us being that it's an enchantment creature as compared to like Eternal Witness. You get to play my favorite green card ever printed, Life from the Loam. The dredge mechanic's going to be really good here. You're just going to pick this up and never miss a land drop and dredge cards into your graveyard, and then use Anikthia's ability to turn those into tokens and put them onto the battlefield. We're going to have some powerful enchantment creatures in the deck, so Flicker might be a good include. Same with Ephemerate. I love this card so much. Because we're adding black, we get to play Whip of Erebos, which means we get to return creature cards from our graveyard to the battlefield. And creatures you control have lifelink, so that's kind of nice. Imagine a time and place where you end up with 2 or 3 copies of Smothering Tithe on the battlefield because of a Nixthia and O'Hare Talk. That means you probably get to treat yourself to a doubling season as well. How about 2 or 3 copies of Ghostly Prison? I like that kind of idea. And of course we get to play Blind Obedience. So, tons of enchantments, but now they're also creatures, which means we can close out the game pretty quickly. We can use Whip of Erebos to bring out big things that we want to add to the deck. And we go about crushing our opponents, just like all enchantment decks do, right? Hope that helps. Do you ever wonder what it'd be like to party all the time? Well, that's how you get a Xenagos God of Revels deck. The lore behind Xenagos is absolutely wild. He was just a regular satyr running around Theros, but he was partying everywhere he went. His legend of party grew and grew and grew. The devotion of his followers rose and rose to the point where he literally became the god of partying. So in his name, we build a deck to celebrate all the partying. Here we go. We are playing cards that are not here for a long time, they're here for a good time. Things like Groundbreaker, a 6/1 for 3 mana. This thing hits for 12 with Xenagos on the battlefield. We're playing Ball Lightning, a 6/1 for 3 mana. They have to sacrifice at end of turn. We're playing Malignus. This thing wipes out one of your opponents when it hits. We're playing Impetuous Devils. We've got another 6/1, this time for 4 mana. There's no question that Galta costs 2 mana in this deck, so we're jamming him in there too. Doesn't matter how small his arms are when he hits for 24 power. Our creatures are going to die, so we want Quartzwood Crasher in the deck to kind of double up how long our creatures stay on the battlefield. We also want to lean into Devotion, because there's times where we're just going to attack with Xenagos as well. So we need cards like Deus of Calamity. More like Deuce of Calamity, right? That means we're playing Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. We're playing Nyx Lotus. We're also playing Goreclaw, Terror of Calcisma. Just a bit of extra power when our creatures attack as well. For even more extra power, we're playing Unnatural Growth. We're getting a buff from God Eternal Ronus as well. And to keep our hands full, one of the most underrated cards, Greater Good. When you've got a 12 power creature on board and it's going to die at the end of turn anyways, you sack it to Greater Good, you draw 12 cards, you discard 3. That's a great deal in my books. We also get to double up on using our creatures because we're playing Felden of the Third Path. We're making artifact creature copies. We don't want to be trifled with, so we're playing Rhythm of the Wild and giving our creatures the ability to riot. We're also playing Mage Slayer. So when our creature goes to attack, it'll deal damage equal to its power to defending player, and then it's still attacking. Gotta love Shards of Alara for that kind of thing. So with Xenagos, God of Revels, you too can party so hard you become a god of your EDH table. Hope this helps. I will never get tired of talking about this deck. That's right, it's frickin' birds, baby. Falco Spara Pact Weaver is the perfect bird commander. The only thing that's wrong is his name doesn't sound like a bird sound. But we've got some answers to that in other cards we're playing. So let's get into it. So along with birds, we need counters on birds. That's why we're playing Mother Goose. That's why we're adding Virtue of Loyalty to the deck. We're playing Metallic Mimic and naming Bird. Every single counter we have is an opportunity to play a spell from the top of our deck, which is essentially card draw. One of the best birds in the deck for that as well, Thrumming Bird. Just proliferate. We also get some cool ramp options in Watcher of the Spheres and Warden of Evocile. They're going to make our birds cost 1 less to cast. That's some great ramp. Now, you don't want all your birds to hit the graveyard all at once, but it's going to happen probably. So we're going to play Soulcatcher's Airy. We get to use feather counters, great mechanic. And we're coming back with a vengeance that only birds could enact. Make those birds huge. Obviously, if we're dealing with the brokers, we want brokers ascendancy. +1 counters on each of our birds at the end of each of our turn. I'm here for that. Onslaught Common Airborne Aid is the perfect card draw card for this deck. Draw a card for each bird in play. Yeah, that includes your opponent's birds too. Ledger Shredder's a no-brainer in this deck. It's going to get huge. We're going to get some card selection. And we finally found a good deck for Nesting Dovehawk. A bird deck. Let's make more Nesting Dovehawks, get more +1/+1 counters. I talked earlier about birds that have bird-sounding names. Well, here's one. Kangi, the Airy Keeper. This has a ridiculous casting cost with Kicker, but we are going to get a ton of feather counters on Kangi, and that's going to give us a chance to cast more spells. How about Reanimate for our bird deck? We have Celestial Gatekeeper. When it dies, return 2 birds to play. Awesome. We have a bird-specific board wipe in Damning Verdict. That seems good. And because we need counters on our birds, let's play the Ozolith. Let's play the Ozolith, the Shattered Spire. How about we add Hardened Scales to the deck? That seems reasonable. We also get Felidar Retreat, but don't you dare make a cat token. These are frickin' birds, okay? Just put counters on your stuff and have a great time. We also get Tribute to the World Tree. Turns out birds are pretty flimsy. So when they come in, you're getting 2 counters on each of them. That's potentially 2 more looks at cards from the top of your deck. And we get to play one of the funnest cards in the game, Dovescape. Counter non-creature spells, people get birds. So late game, you're just going to start firing off your non-creature spells and making more birds, which means your birds are going to be able to attack and close out the game. So Falco Spara, great bird deck. Hope that helps.